There's got to be a faster way to do that. But what's up, everybody? John here. Last time we did this show, Justin wasn't able to join us, and I was told I also never introduced myself. So I'm going to do that real quick now and kind of give you guys at least like the 5-second viewpoint on why we're even doing this podcast. So for me, I've been working in the video game industry for about 10 years now, a little bit longer actually. Started on the content side. I used to do a lot of stuff in Twitch streaming, actually. Was a Twitch partner for a while. And I'm working as an attorney now after kind of doing some biz dev and some other things along the way. Super passionate about the video game industry. Been working in it for a while. And I just wanted to kind of have some of those talks that you can, where you can dive a little deep into some of these business concepts that touch on some legal things and also give you guys some relevant and cool information. My thought process with the name Manual Save is it kind of is like that oh shit moment where I just would always kind of like stack saves in video games because I'm like, I need something to fall back on. You know, it's kind of that thing where it's like, okay, I know this is going to be important. It's going to be something I need to kind of have, you know, in my back pocket. And that's kind of what I want this podcast to be. So with that, I'm going to cut over to Justin real quick. And Justin is the creative director of 8 Prime Esports. And I'll let him kind of chat for a couple seconds.
I'm just Justin Connors, I'd say owner, founder, creative director of 8 Prime Esports, long history in creative and brand and content. And my thing here was me and John already had a lot of conversations about a lot of things in the business behind the scenes. And when John was like, I really have this idea for a podcast that we can get in, you know, to a lot of really good conversations about the business and the side of the things that people don't talk about often. I was like, I love that. I want to be a part of that as much as possible. So, you know, here we are, and I'm looking forward to having some great conversations.
All right. So this week we're joined by Sean Pinnock, CEO of Cyberdream. They published or developed. Wow, I can't even speak today. Virtual Battlegrounds out on Steam. Really cool VR battle royale game. I'll let him do a quick introduction, and then we'll just kind of dive into it.
Yeah, great. I'm really, really happy to be here with you, John and Justin. This should be really fun today. Haven't talked a lot about, you know, our journey from conception to actual release of Virtual Battlegrounds. So this will be one of the first times we've really, really talked about it and dived into it. So really grateful to be here and excited to be talking to you guys.
Awesome. Glad to see Marco and Kyle in the chat. So I just want to kind of like do a quick kind of look into Virtual Battlegrounds and kind of like how it even came to be about. So where exactly did that game idea come from? Because I know you started working on this before battle royales were like the thing that everyone thought of.
Yeah, well, I mean, kind of going back a bit, I've always been a big fan of shooting games. You know, my brother and I, we grew up, you know, playing Call of Duty, Halo, all the classics. I think we were like one of the first people to get the Mile High Club, if you know the Modern Warfare achievement. It was really prestigious at the time to get. It was like 0.01% of players out. Anyway, so I really, you know, really into the FPS genre as well as role playing game genres. But you know, I had released a couple games at this point. I, you know, worked at Electronic Arts for a little bit, and I knew how hard it was to do indie. I think where a lot of the developers fail is they build a game that only themselves want to play. They don't think about their addressable market. And this was in 2017. I started doing some pretty heavy market research. I had just finished a really good book that I can't remember the name of now because it's been a couple of years since I read it. But the premise behind the book was you want to figure out the success of your product before you build your product, right? Which in video games is extremely important if you're able to do this because they take years to make and they cost tons of money. So we had done a lot of market research and we figured out, hey, battle royales are going to be huge. Like this game called PUBG, it's this pretty new game, but it's up and coming and it's really trending. This could be something that's huge in a few years from now. So I ended up making a Reddit post asking people about what games they wanted to see played. And one of the ideas that we put up was a battle royale, and it was like reaffirming to what we had as our prior beliefs. And an overwhelming majority wanted to see a VR battle royale. And then fast forward a few years, you know, we got Fortnite, we got Apex, we've got all these games, so many other games coming in the marketplace, and it worked out pretty well for us in that regard.
No, it's awesome.
Yeah, it's actually interesting because you came in obviously, this where business and creative kind of always kind of bump heads to what they're going to make. And it seems like you guys came in right away already having those both in synergy with each other.
Yeah, that's the hard thing, honestly. Like, as a creative myself, I had built some games that in the past where it was like, oh, I really would love to play this game, and I didn't think about, does anyone else want to play this game? And like the games were, maybe like if we had executed better, maybe they could have been really popular. I don't know, but they did okay, right? They did okay, and it would have been nice to have thought about it a little bit more from a strategic perspective, which we did with Virtual Battlegrounds.
So you mentioned some of the games you worked on previously. For people who don't know, what are those?
Well, there's hundreds of them no one here is ever going to learn about because they're never going to make it. Or maybe they're like on itch.io somewhere. There's a bunch of little cool ones. But the ones that you can go and look up right now, one's called Black Sea Odyssey. It's on Steam. It's on Nintendo Switch. It's on PlayStation, Xbox One. Yeah, on all the things, right? Xbox. Just right. You were one of our first guys to take a look at it when you were working at Xbox or Microsoft. Sorry if that was loud. And then there's another game called Emerald I built, which was my first my serious foray into VR. And it's kind of like a role-playing game that we never really finished. It's on Steam. It's okay. Virtual Battlegrounds is much better.
Yeah. So what did you learn during the process of making some of those early titles that helped you make Virtual Battlegrounds?
So I don't know if anyone here is, an indie developer or like an entrepreneur that wants to make games, but my advice to you, if you're coming right out of school and let's say you have an engineering or development background like me or something along those lines, or artists, etc., it's really, really hard when you're coming out of school. And that's what I did right out of school, was build a game, go to market. And we were able to barely justify the time we put into it. But we were in my mom's basement for a year and a half working on not Virtual Battlegrounds, but Black Sea Odyssey, my first game that I made when I was right out of school. And honestly, my advice to most people would be, it would be smarter to take a job at a AAA studio or a big studio and let them pay for you to make mistakes and learn, and then go and start a company later. I had to learn the hard way, which was, when I fail, I'm not getting paid to fail, right? It sucks, but I will say I learned, so much. I think a lot, at least more in terms of entrepreneurship than I would have at a bigger company. Whereas at a big company, I might have learned more about engineering, and having a mentor there would have been really nice. I didn't really have that, so that would kind of be my first initial advice for you guys: is right out of school, probably a bad idea. Unless you're just gung-ho, and I was super gung-ho, and it was a hard route to take. And we've made it work now, right? Like we're somewhat successful now, but it's taken a long time. So
I understand too that working for even like a bigger studio, you can kind of take away what works for yourself as an independent, and what works. If they're a bigger studio, like obviously you work for somebody like EA, like they do things well, they do business well. So you can't discredit that. You have to look at the things and go, okay, these are the reasons why their titles have been successful. And if you're going to take those and adopt it for yourself, what better way than to work with some of the bigger studios first? So
yeah, absolutely. After Black Sea Odyssey released, I took a job at EA because I was like, man, that was rough. Like I want to just get a 9 to 5. I want to sit at a desk. I want to be told what to do. And I learned a lot when I was there. I really one thing that EA does amazingly well is production. Like they do not mess around when it comes to like deadlines, getting stuff done. Like these guys are a well-oiled machine. And I took a lot of that, home with me mentally for future projects or anything else I do in life. So yeah, absolutely.
No, it definitely makes sense that some of those kind of just well-oiled processes that are being used by a bigger entity can kind of be used to kind of help you learn how to move forward more efficiently, just because like, at least the way it is with the school I went to and stuff, they don't necessarily teach you how to run a law firm. They teach you how to think. I would assume that at least within game design, it's kind of similar. They teach you how to think within the context of that. And correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. You guys can hear me still, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. So I was in the game design program at UCF, which I think was ranked like top 5 in the last few years for game graduate school. So really grateful to have been through that program. And my professor, Gideon Shabib, he really, like my main game design professor, as well as Peter Smith, they really, it's university education, right? They're not going to teach you all the hands-on things you need to know. Though we did learn a lot. the reality is when it comes to, I think almost anything in life, there's going to be a lot of things that you're just not taught, and you have to learn those things yourself. So a lot of it was critical thinking, right? Like how to approach these things. I think the biggest thing that I really learned from university was design, like how to think, and it's actually really complicated. A lot of people think, oh, you just make a game, but it's actually really hard to make something fun. At least, I mean, it depends, right? Like sometimes it is, sometimes it comes more natural, depends on what the product is, but it can be really hard. Like an idea you have in your head, you go, oh, that'd be so cool. But then taking that thing, that abstract thing, maybe like, oh, I'd love to make a game about like dragons fighting space pirates in a galaxy, right? And I don't know. That's so right. Then how do you make that fun? How do you actually play that? And there's a huge process to that. Definitely, university taught me a lot about that process.
No, it makes sense.
And then along the way, I would assume then that I feel like we all say this about every business, but assuming your networking along the way has been important as well, and the people you've met and worked with as you've been building.
Absolutely. And I would say it depends a lot on the type of business and, the type of entrepreneur. There's a lot of game studios out there that have been hyper successful through just making a good product. And I think it's one of the cool things about our industry is you can not be a business person. You can not be an entrepreneur. You can be super introverted, and you can be super successful just by making a good enough product and be a good enough artist or whatever it is. I know that for me individually, in the way I run my company, I consider myself to be more well-rounded, I think, where I'm able to do a lot of the networking and I'm able to do a lot of other things. So I use that to my advantage, and it has absolutely been huge. I think it really depends on the kind of game studio you want to build, right? Like if you want to have an indie house with 5 or 10 developers, then just being a good developer is probably all you need. But if you want to grow a company to 100, 200 employees, which is my goal, and build bigger products, compete in the main workplace, right, with these bigger companies, I think you do need more of a business mind, or you need to align yourself with people that have that business mindset and then that networking skill set, because those things do go a tremendous way.
So how far into your market research, even for when you're making the game of, obviously VR Battlegrounds is a VR game, but were you set on VR from the jump, or did you teeter, or you're like, no, we want to make a virtual reality VR from the jump?
So VR for me personally is my passion, as well as gaming. Those are my two passions. From there, it was a business decision. I knew going into VR that it's not a very big marketplace. I will say the one advantage someone like me has over non-VR is the space isn't as competitive, right? Like if I were to make the game that I made and made it not for VR, no one would play it because Call of Duty Warzone exists, right? I'm able to compete against smaller companies, right, and still have a fighting chance. So there was a good amount of market research done, but it wasn't before. And I know a lot about VR and a lot about the market and that kind of thing. A lot of research has been done there, especially when I was out trying to raise money. I had to do a lot of that research. But for me, VR was first a passion, and I'm just going to do that no matter what. And it's going to be the way that my life goes. Generally speaking, that's the way Cyberdream's going to go. But beyond that, then the market research really started happening. And really, the biggest thing that I think I did, and this has turned out pretty good, but I think there's better ways to do it. After I kind of did my initial market research, is I did a lot of my research directly by interfacing with my community. Like, okay, what do you guys want to do? What do you guys want to see? And literally the Virtual Battlegrounds is almost a community-driven development. Like there were a lot of ideas that I had and some things that I had in there, but it's mostly been like, what do you guys want? What do you think? And it's been really fun to do it that way. And I think it can work really well that way. I mean, Riot Games is a prime example of a company that did that. They're like the most successful game studio ever, like one of, right? So I think it just depends. But for us, it's the way we've done it.
Yeah, since we're talking about some of that kind of market research stuff, was there ever a point where you were a little scared by the fact that you're doing a VR game, which is already a fairly small market, and then doing a multiplayer VR game? Because as much as people like to talk about the success of a game like Fall Guys right now, there's got to be a moment even for them where they were worried, are we going to be able to get 60 people in a lobby consistently enough after launch?
Yeah, that was my biggest fear, honestly, at the start of development. And it actually almost strayed me away from building Virtual Battlegrounds. I know that we're a really small company. 2, we don't have a big marketing budget, right? So there's just a lot of factors in place we didn't know, but we decided we'd go all in on it, and then we'd also build some game modes that didn't require multiplayer, right? So like right now you can play with bots, and that actually is one of the problems that we're having right now. Is even though we're still probably a top 50 most popular VR title, we're not getting the player counts that we needed to have full matches back to back, because really the only top 10 games do. We think we can get back up there. We got some marketing plans planned for a holiday season, but we'll see. So yeah, that was a big concern, and it is a problem for us right now. Hopefully the market grows. We're not really so much concerned about the market. We're thinking about how do we build the game out to work better where there's only a few players, like maybe 10 or 15 players in a lobby, right? Or 5 players in a lobby. So we're working with those kind of things. We have some of that in the game right now.
Awesome. So let's jump back a little bit. You talked about building up a team. You started this project just with yourself, right? How did you and when did you decide that you needed to bring people on?
So I was overly confident in my skills. This isn't my first rodeo, right? I've built a lot of games. When I was in college, I built tons of little things, and like I always just like did them on my own. It was like bam, 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 knock it out. And every time I did something a little more challenging, right? Like making the game out of college, and then doing some other projects, and it was like, okay, I think I can make a virtual reality battle royale by myself in like a year and a half. So let's do it. And started Devin, and like 6 months go by, and I'm like, shit, this is not gonna happen. I was trying to write all the code, I was doing all the art, all the level design, and I was like, this is gonna take me forever, and the game's gonna suck. And not only that too, but the market was changing. Like games were starting to get better. And like in 2017, guys, like the big part of the reason I wanted to make this game is that there wasn't a VR battle royale. There weren't any like grand scale games. It was all wave shooters and crap. And then like to that mid 2018, there's a VR battle royale that came out called Standout. Some of these other games, like Contractors, was another VR title. Like a lot of these games are looking good, and I'm like, if I'm going to compete, I have to grow my team. So yeah, I raised some capital, John. Did some pitching. I actually put out some early YouTube videos that weren't very pretty, I'll say, but they got a lot of traction, and I was able to show those to potential investors, and then get some money. And then there's a long story from there and how the team got built, but team started getting built, right? And it started bringing on people, and Lord knows I would never have had a chance at making this game without my team. So at least the quality is now.
No, that makes perfect sense. And you mentioned that you got some funding. What was that process like, and what do you attribute being able to get the funding to?
So it's a few things. So this is like my third time raising money. I didn't raise a lot of money, to be clear. This wasn't like a standard venture capital round where we're raising millions of dollars. This was like a couple, like less than a couple $100,000, right? Like not a lot of money for comparably to venture capital. It is a lot of money for some people, but to make a game, really, it's not that much money. Anyway, it was enough though to pay myself and pay most of my teammates and just like get the ball rolling. But anyway, what the process was like. So it kind of helps a lot depending on like, I know some of you guys here are probably listening. How do I raise money, right? So it depends on where you're at personally and then in your career. So when I first raised money, right out of school, a big part of the reason why I chose to make that game rather than taking a AAA job is that one of my partners and we found some money. It wasn't a lot. It was like $35,000 to build Black Sea Odyssey, right? But at the time when we were like 23 years old and in college, I was like, oh my God, we could work on this game forever, pay ourselves $300 a month and live at mom's house, right? And that's what we did. So that was my first foray into it, right? And we took very little money and we built a prototype and we pitched it to we built a really good prototype. We pitched it. We didn't ask for a lot of money. We were able to get that money, right? Fast forward some time to where I am now. It's 2017. I've already done this a couple times. My investors have made their money back. We made some money, right? I've got a track record of success. So at that point, all I had to do was show them, hey, look, I got a video. People like it. Here's my resume. Then it wasn't very hard. And I wasn't asking for a lot of money, again, relatively. So you have to think from the investor's lens. Like imagine yourself in a position where you have a lot of money. Imagine yourself as a person who's got a lot of money. This is, I think, the best mental framework you can do for this. And you want to make money, right? You don't want to just give your money away to someone. You need to be convinced that person is going to make you money, right? So how are you as an entrepreneur or a developer going to show them something that's going to validate to them, hey, I'm going to take your $200,000 and I'm not going to just blow it because I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to make you money, right? And one of the best ways you can do that, if you don't have a lot and you don't have a resume, is to build that prototype. And then if you want to take it a step further, is you validate market success, which is what I did. Instead of building the prototype, I made a YouTube video which went viral, and I was like, hey, look, this can work. Prototype, validate market success, and then from there it's investor relations and network and that kind of thing.
So you didn't do a traditional deck. You kind of just had, here's the idea. Obviously, I'm the guy who can make it. Obviously, people want to see it, and then brought that to them. You didn't have 5-page decks of like, here's how other games have done and all that too. Or was that just parts of the conversations as well?
So in this specific instance with Virtual Battlegrounds, I did not build. I built like a 3-page deck, which is not a real deck. And that was really just so the person who actually invested in this product I already had a relationship with and was a previous investor, so I didn't need to show him as much. But I will say the first time I raised money, I did build a very good deck. I wasn't your standard like pitch decks. At least if you're trying to get a publisher, they're not as effective. We built like a GDD with like some business stuff in it, and it was like 30 pages long. I'd be even willing to share it with some of you guys in here that are trying to raise money if you're a game developer. Now that's what we use for that time. So we did build deck for that case. Now, if you're trying to pitch to a venture capitalist, then it's a completely different process. I'm not as much of an expert there because I've never done it. It's more of a company thing than a game.
Yeah, you guys went more like a traditional kind of publisher route where they gave you at least the initial capital you needed to kind of fund initially the development. And then as things kept going, you found new ways to supplement and make that money elsewhere, correct? Where you would start doing some of the work you were doing on the consulting side.
Yeah. Good question, John. Yeah. Obviously, John and I, we have a good relationship, so he knows all about my business. And
I read about contracts, but I know what happens.
Yeah, you read my contracts. So John knows all the right questions to ask. So the money we raised, it wasn't enough. Big surprise. I think this happens a lot. Games are hard to make, guys. They're really, really hard to make. I only be a game developer if you're really damn passionate about it, because you guys are hard to make, and they cost a lot of money to do well, because you got to pay smart people to work on them because they're not going to work for free, right? It's just simple stuff here. Anyway, yeah, so we had to make more money at some point, right? This was like late 2018, late 2018, and I really did not want to do contracting work, to be honest with you guys. When I first started my business, I was like, I only want to make video games, and I think it's a little bit naive. There is services for other people, doing things for other people, right? Especially those things are meaningful. Like they actually are very rewarding. And I started getting into the service industry. Cyberdream started getting into the service industry. We had a lot of really talented game developers in Central Florida working for Cyberdream, and I knew a lot of these people. And so I started bringing a lot of people together, and we started doing contracts. And it's actually more than 60 or 70% of Cyberdream's revenue right now. It's actually through contracts, the rest of their games. And that additional revenue was able to, fulfill the rest of the needs financially for Virtual Battlegrounds just to finish the game. And well as maybe work on other games in the future too. So it's cool.
Yeah, that's just the game industry has always been a little crazy to me in the sense that it's so hit driven, in the sense of if you hit on something where it turns into gold, maybe you get Fortnite, but the reality is, what are the odds of that? 1% of 1% of 1% of 1% of 1%. It's very, very low. So to me, I've always found it interesting when people turn toward more kind of flat revenue models instead of just the spike, because it gives you a lot more stability to kind of build something long term where you can keep that team and continue to grow and scale from the smaller project to the medium-sized project to eventually kind of the overly ambitious project you probably wanted to do straight out of school, So it sounds like that's what you're trying to do.
Yeah, that's exactly. And I don't think I so much tried to do that when I started the company. It was more of something that had to happen at some point, right? There were some months where it was like, how am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to pay my employees? And it was definitely a learning experience. It was challenging, but absolutely. I think at this point, John, you summed it up really well. Like the way we've built Cyberdream at this point is we have this nice level, this flat line of income, right? And this flat line is actually growing. But it's a healthy growth curve, right? Which I think is a more standard business model. And that's our contracting side of our business. And then we're hit driven with our games, right? Like we're hoping that one day we're going to make, that Half-Life, right? Or make that game that everyone knows about, but you can't, do the mortgage, right? You can't do that for that kind of thing. You need a safety net. And that's what we're doing. Virtual Battlegrounds has been, I want to say it's a moderate success, right? We made our money back. We made our money back and we invested, but we're not running away with Ferraris either, right? We're pretty level with the success. Now maybe the holiday season, something will happen. Maybe not quite Ferrari level, but maybe we'll get a nice BMW, right? I mean, we'll see. I mean, that's just mixed terminology. I won't literally go buy a BMW, but
I was gonna say you already have a pretty nice car.
I got a pretty nice car, but that's not from Virtual Battlegrounds. Yeah, so it's nice to have that safety net and then go for those hits, right? And that's what we want to do as a company. We want to go for hits, and hopefully Cyberdream will still be a hit. We'll see, but we've got other games planned. I got some really ambitious things that I want to do eventually.
So just jumping back into Virtual Battlegrounds development a little bit, what were some of the bigger hiccups that you hit along the way that you weren't expecting?
There's been a lot of hiccups. The first thing was VR, and I didn't think I fully appreciated this. Virtual reality games, there's a lot of difficulty that comes with making them that I think consumers don't appreciate necessarily, or at least I didn't appreciate when I started developing and using as a developer. One is you have to render the game twice, so it already makes it twice as hard to get FPS, right? And most games run at like 30 to 60, and a lot of like AAAs go 30, right? And we have to run at 90. So that's like 3 times as hard to hit at least as 30, probably more like 4 or 5 times. And then you're rendering the game twice. And then we wanted to make an open world multiplayer game. So the performance constraints were extremely challenging as a small studio to get a game that actually ran well. And I didn't appreciate how hard this would be. We literally rebuilt our game probably 2 or 3 times just to get performance to work. And that was one thing where like, I think that I might have actually been able to make the game by myself if that wasn't the case, right? I might have actually been able to, or at least like it wouldn't have been as good, but I might have been able to. But there's no way. Like when I had to it's when I got to that point, like 6 months in, like I got to rebuild this entire freaking game. It's not going to run. Like I'm getting like 20 to 25 FPS. I don't know what to do. I have to like rebuild every asset. I got to like redo a lot of the code. So that was a huge hiccup. And then there's a ton of design challenges that come with VR that I kind of knew were going to happen, but I wasn't really fully appreciative of how difficult they'd be. Like, how do you make weapons feel good? How do you make these things feel good? VR is a marketplace where everything's very undiscovered, and so you're trying to discover the correct answers. Whereas if you go out and you build like a general FPS, a lot of those answers are like, how do you do a joystick? Well, everyone knows that. How do you shoot? Well, everyone knows how to do that, right? And VR, it's like, well, how do I move? Well, I don't. Maybe you use a joystick. Maybe we build a new locomotion system, and we did, and people really like it. So it's kind of that interesting discovery process right now. Anyway, yeah. So
what about how like hardware limitations and all that? Is that something you think about when making these games? Like obviously for your market research, you have to think about the price, but like I obviously know that with VR, there's only so many things that can actually do them, and the system itself requires not only a system that can run it, but the device itself. So do you see that still being an issue for VR going forward? Do you think we're hopefully going to get to a way that can kind of, make that a little bit easier for VR to sort of like to grow more than it is now?
Yeah, I definitely think better hardware would make it easier, right? Like we could, like a lot of guys, a lot of consumers, they look at VR games like, oh, why does it look like crap? It's like, well, it's because it's like, we got to get 90 FPS, we got to render it twice, right? If I were to take, my game actually would get like 350 FPS on a regular desktop. So people don't know, but it only gets like 90 right in VR. But yeah, better hardware would help. I'm not banking on it anytime soon. I think there's some really amazing technologies that are going to be coming out soon. I know for us specifically for Virtual Battlegrounds, we were 1060 GTX i5, like that's min spec for VR. So those are actually pretty nice specs. So that was nice. Now when the Quest came out, that was a major curveball. We're probably not going to go to Quest anytime soon because it's essentially a mobile chipset. But I think what will really make VR, this is like future talk, but I think what will really make VR very compelling for mainstream audiences is when they figure out how to do some sort of cloud rendering or cloud-based like hardware, software. What I mean by that is like if you can have a supercomputer directly play your game for you, right? And then you're just rendering it on your screen, which they kind of have done in some of this, but the issue right now is latency. I think like the NVIDIA did something like this. But anyway, basically imagine like you have a really cheap headset, it's like $150, and there's this supercomputer out in Texas or whatever nearby or to your house, wherever you live, and it's rendering all this gameplay for you and sending it to your headset directly. I think we're actually closer to that people realize with like 5G and some other things. So there'll be a point when we can have the best possible graphics you can imagine on a $200 headset. And I don't think that's as far away as people realize. So I think that's what will really be game changing.
Almost kind of along the lines of like what Microsoft's trying to do with xCloud, where they want you to be able to play Xbox games on at least an Android device right now. Hopefully Apple eventually, because I've got one of those, but like that's its own ball of wax right now with everything going on with them. But I definitely think that would be a super interesting route for this stuff to go. long term, and it's just starting to deal with some of the issues we have almost geographically and politically in a lot of ways with internet speeds, like that last mile issue. It doesn't really matter how good the connection is in certain areas. You're gonna have a hard time getting it to the end users.
Yeah, that's a challenge, and it's an infrastructure thing. It's a little disheartening as a developer because you see the technology so close, and you want to build something like that because you know what it's capable of. But then you look at your total addressable market, and you go, "Well, we can't build this right now. It sucks. Maybe in a few more years." And that's kind of what I mean by that right now. Is like right now the technology it's starting to exist. Like this technology we're talking about exists. Like you said, Microsoft is working on it, Google Stadia, but it's not. Not everyone has a 1 gigabyte up and down, right? And hopefully that'll change in time because I really want to make that thing because if you guys want the Ready Player One, that's what it's going to be built on, right? It's going to be built on that thing or that sort of cloud infrastructure. So I want to do eventually make that, and I hope it changes, but it's going to be an infrastructure problem, right? And like that's more political, and I can't solve that problem.
Well, it's interesting too, is because with like say current situation, COVID, all that kind of stuff, it feels like now would be the best time for VR because people are at home. They're obviously buying more games than they've done before, but they could use the escapism. I mean, the fact that Microsoft Simulator is as popular is because you get to fly around the world from your house now, and it looks amazing. So it's like VR is almost like it. I wish it was a little more set up because this would be the time for it to really shine.
I 100% agree with you right now. There's a lot of companies out there raising money, building all kinds of awesome solutions for virtual reality. I got a friend who wants to bring education home in VR. I think there's really great time for it. I do think the technology and the adoption's a little too early, right, for it to go super mainstream, like you're saying. There needs to be more to happen. But it is a great time for VR. The big part of the reason why we released Virtual Battlegrounds when we did was because everyone was home. We actually wanted to wait to release until probably closer to Christmas this year, but we're like, let's get it out early. Everyone's home right now. There's not a better market time. No games are releasing right now. Let's drop it. And I think that definitely was a big part of our launch success was our market timing. And yeah, so it's a good time right now for VR, I'd say. And I wish it was a little further along because I think there's a lot more problems that could be solved with VR. Right now.
Well, I know for me, even I just bought my VR headset for myself like maybe 2 months ago. I tried to get one when COVID first started happening, and they're sold out. Same thing with Switches, same thing with a lot of cheap laptops. Same thing with every single webcam on the planet, like the market demand is now there suddenly, but the supply was anticipating normal levels and not for what has happened. This is kind of an unpredictable kind of situation.
What was the headset you were developing with? What were you using?
So, I mean, we developed on every major HMD because we got to test them all. But so Vive, Oculus, Index, all of them.
So from your end, what's it been like running a game studio during COVID?
It's been interesting. I think, pretty much every business is challenged right now, some more so than others. We're actually extremely fortunate, I think, as a company and as a discipline to be able to work from home and to be able to still make money right now. And not to get too political, but it's sad to see all the people out of work right now and not be able to work. So we're really fortunate to be able to work. With that being said, how's it actually running it? It's actually ran fairly well. My team, thankfully, I've built up a pretty good team of people at this point, right? And I trust them. We've got a really good way to track productivity, and people have been as productive or maybe even more so working from home. I know initially, like when we first started working from home, like everyone was like doubling their productivity. And I was like, guys, trying to prove a point here? Like, what's going on? Yeah. And then we've like returned to, I think, about normalcy right now. Which is awesome. We're still being productive. I think it's still going good. And I'm actually enjoying it. I will say I have a nice office. You guys can see it, and it's nice working here. But I miss going in and talking to people. So I do want to go back. I feel like it's like even though working from home is nice, I do want to my coworkers, my employees are my friends, and I want to be around them occasionally. So I do miss that. Maybe we'll have some kind of hybrid solution whenever this pandemic closes.
At least for me, I think a hybrid solution's like the optimal one because that's pretty much what I'd been doing from the start. Because for me, I'd go into the office probably 4 days a week and stay home 1 day, and maybe some weeks I might go in 5, some weeks I might go in 2, and it's just nice to have the flexibility when you need it, but also to not lose out on all of the camaraderie / ability to brainstorm and all the benefits of having people physically near you that you can talk to. That's kind of why I liked working out of a co-working space as much as I have. being out of the Orlando game space, at least for me, has been helpful in that regard, because I have people who I can kind of go to and talk to. Whereas when I'm working from home right now, I have my dog, so it's a little bit of a different change there for sure.
Yeah, it was brought up even during the conversation with Kyle Moran that you lose right now we're losing kind of that spark creative where you just walk in to see somebody in the middle of the office and you talk about some stuff and it's like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. Now, if it doesn't happen during your visual meeting, it won't happen. Like those conversations, those spark ideas don't happen just like they naturally used to when you used to run into each other or sit down in a room and just shoot it together. It's that is something that I think is missing for all creatives right now.
Yeah, good.
It's definitely also a little bit of that out of sight, out of mind kind of feeling where, a lot of deal flow happens because you are having those face-to-face meetings and face-to-face settings where you can kind of, communicate back and forth. And when you kind of lose that, you stop thinking as much about other people that you're working with. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, moving into the game space with you, John, and all those other companies in there, I'm 100% certain my business would not have been half as successful as it is right now if I did not make that decision, right? Because of one, all the creativity that happens in a place like that, an environment like that. I mean, I think like Google and a lot of these bigger companies, they have rooms like this where you just hang out and then you have creative discussions, right? I mean, we do that a lot there, and so absolutely. And then in terms of deal flow too, I mean, meeting Troy and you and all these Kyle and all these other businesses. I've learned so much just by interacting with all these other people. So I do highly recommend for those of you that are, young entrepreneurs or when I say young, I mean in terms of your business, not necessarily your age, right? I know entrepreneurs are much older that have been successful as well as young in terms of age. So young in terms of their company, co-working space is a great, especially if you can find a good community. It's more about the community in the space itself. Find a good community, moving into a space like that is really beneficial. And has been very beneficial for me, just being around other people, like-minded people, help you out.
I know you mentioned pretty early on that you kind of wished you'd found some mentors and people like that you could have learned from, early on. Have you found some people like that you can, or is that still something you're looking for, or are you trying to be that for the other people?
It's a bit. So I'm definitely being that for other people. I will, I'm somewhat successful right now, but I wouldn't consider myself like a mega success right at this point. I'm not a 100-person studio yet, right? I'm like a 15. And I want to be 100%, and I'm barely like I still don't. I can. What's really nice for the first time in my life, I'm not worried about how am I going to pay my employees next month. I'm thinking about how am I going to pay my employees 6 months from now, which is a really nice place to be. I've never been there before, but when I can think about how am I, maybe a year or two, then I'll be like, all right, I've made it, right? But I haven't made it yet, so I'm still figuring it out. But I do have some mentors, like obviously I have a lot of like I don't know if mentor's the right word, but a lot of like God, what's the right word? Like John, what do we call each other? Like what do we? Like people that are on like a similar playing field,
yeah,
right?
Peers almost,
peers. So I have a lot of great peers. And then so someone like Chance Glasgow, he's one of the founders of the Activision and Call of Duty franchise. He's actually been a pretty great mentor. Talking with him, he's in Orlando, Full Sail, I think Hall of Famer. And being one of the guys that made Call of Duty is a pretty big deal, right? And he's around, and I've talked to him occasionally. And then Kunal Patel, who's like one of the first people to really advise me and especially in a business sense and show me the ropes in Orlando. He was massively instrumental in the first couple of years, and he helped a business, Fat Merchant, grow to the company today. I think they're a $100 million plus valuation on their company. Different, it's a tech industry, but it's not games, right? But it's fairly similar. And then there's someone like Augie too, who I talk with occasionally, who's been very successful with his company, in his Game Dungeon Defender. So there's people around. I'd say right now probably the best relationships with Chance and Kunal, and they've been very helpful. So there's some people in Central Florida and Florida making it happen. So it's nice to have that.
Well, it's awesome to hear you mention Chance, just because he actually is our guest for next week. So for anybody watching, you'll get to hear from Chance next week, and we'll be talking about some cool stuff with him, because he's one of those people that I've sat down and talked with and probably heard the same story 5 or 6 times, but it never sounds the same because there's always some new wrinkle to it that is just super interesting. And he's got just fascinating perspectives, having worked for as long as he did on a franchise like Call of Duty.
For sure.
Yeah. So I know I cut you off a little bit earlier when you were kind of talking about what your plans are for like the holidays in VBG and kind of trying to re-energize the player base. What are you planning that you can share with us now? You know?
Yeah, so I'm actually going to do a podcast on my own for my company tomorrow. We do them like bi-weekly or monthly, right? And give them an update. I'm going to be updating them tomorrow on this. But basically, our player counts have been getting lower, and we did some events. We did like a cash tournament like a month ago, and we had some issues with it. So right now, our company, our studio's main focus is we want to make Virtual Battlegrounds really good. Like we're working on Virtual Battlegrounds, and we already think it's like actually which is like awesome. We like this is our team's goal was to get our ratings on Steam back to very positive, and they got back there this last week, so that feels really good. And then we're like, okay, we're gonna keep focusing on these things we want to build, and then as soon as they're done, which we're thinking is gonna be like late September, we're gonna start marketing the game a lot. So we want to release season 2, so we're gonna have all this new content. We're actually talking with some larger influencers, maybe doing some partnerships for marketing and that kind of thing, and then go for a really big push during the holiday season and see if we can get back in that top spend slot. But we don't want to do it until we feel the game is like really there. Like when we launched, like I was saying, we maybe launched a little early and we recognize a lot of the issues and our players have a lot of concerns, and we want to like clean all those up, make the game super polished, push hard during the holiday season for marketing. So that's our current plan.
I know you did a tournament earlier this year, and you and I have talked about VR esports in the past, but what are your thoughts on that as like kind of a future kind of frontier for esports? Because for me, at least, the interesting thing is how it kind of combines some level of physicality with also the, dexterity and stuff that's required for video games.
Yeah, so I'm a huge fan of VR esports. I do think that it's early right now, and I would not look at the current VR esports scape and go, "Oh, this is it." That's not. I think you have to use your imagination. You really have to use your imagination to think about where VR esports can be. So first of all, I'm a huge fan of like Riot Games and League of Legends. I'm watching their tournaments right now. They're coming up a world season as well as Dota and Counter Strike. Like all these games have done, and I was there like back in like the StarCraft days, or at least like I was like 12, right? And I used to watch them back then, and no one even cared. And it's revolutionized so much. But I think to see the future for what VR esports can be, you just kind of like imagine. So I'm also like a wrestler. I used to wrestle in college. And I'm somewhat of a physical athlete, I guess is what I'm getting at. But imagine like you can blend those two, like you were getting at, John, right? So imagine you have a scenario where there's guys on a platform, right? And then maybe like imagine like a Super Bowl, like Coliseum, right? And these dudes are all decked out in VR, and they're playing maybe some sort of sword fighting game, and they're like running around and they're jumping, and it's very physical. Like you could be there in person and watch them and be like, damn, that looks cool. These guys are athletes. And then there's another layer of reality like on top of it, right? They're running around, they're jumping, they're like, doing like gymnastics level stuff. And then in VR, they're like these actual avatars, these characters, and maybe they're like actually fighting dragons and they're riding around in the clouds, right? Like that's just kind of like scratching the surface, but it gets the idea of where it can be in the future. And I really do think it's going to be huge. I think in our lifetime, I think in the next 10 years, we'll start to see it. In the next 20, it's going to be super prevalent, especially for mainstream and like younger. I think like the next generation, especially, we're going to see like some absolutely mind-blowingly, ridiculously cool VR esports things happen in the future. But it's going to take time. Technology's going to be better. There's going to be more adoption. And we're going to start seeing it more. VR ML's done a great job starting to build a VR esports scene, but I wouldn't look at that and think this is all VR esports can do, right? Like you got to use your imagination a bit. So that's the way I look at it.
What about EVR for like esports? I know people have worked. I think it was who does Half-Life? Valve. All of them were working on like how to like VR watch esports like live as if you were like in an arena watching them. Is that something that is going to be like bigger going forward? I keep thinking like if League of Legends keeps doing what they're doing, it'd be fun to feel like you're in an arena with the guys that are playing. Is that something that you think is coming more soon? Or
it's so funny you said that, because we had built a pitch, which was what you just said, for some investors like 6 months ago. And when we kind of decided let's focus on Virtual Battlegrounds, maybe we'll come back to it later. But I absolutely do think that at some point someone's going to figure out a way to replicate something like a Coliseum experience in virtual reality, and you could go there with thousands of people and watch it live. It's actually something we might be interested in building. In Cyberdream, we've got the tech for it, we got the people for it. We think it's something that could be really cool. Yeah, absolutely. I think we might be like even just going to watch regular, League of Legends, but in VR, right? There might be ways to do that. Imagine just going to regular, or Call of Duty or whatever, just going to a Coliseum, thousands of other people in VR. You're hanging out, you're talking to a guy, and then you're watching the game in front of you. And it could be for other kinds of sports too.
I definitely think it's super interesting, kind of new frontier in a lot of ways.
Yep.
Because like you said, like when you go to a sporting event, a lot of what makes it so exciting is being there. Yep. I know even for me, when I went to Riot's mid-season invitational when they did it in Tallahassee, even though it was very bare bones by comparison to when they've sold out the Barclays Center or, done the Staples Center and stuff like that, it was still pretty epic to just be there with a bunch of people screaming and chanting and just excited to watch an esports event, So I definitely think that's a new frontier. I think a lot of people are trying to figure this out, whether it's, bars trying to figure out how they get people to come in and watch esports, or movie theaters trying to figure out how they get people to come in and watch esports. When it comes to that kind of stuff, what do you think is going to be the real driver that causes someone to kind of come out ahead?
Are you talking about? Are you talking about like what's going to be the thing for VR specifically that causes someone to?
I would say VR and non-VR as well. Okay. I'm just curious, even like if you have an opinion on like, let's assume that COVID goes away in a year or two. Sure. What is going to be the thing that causes people to start wanting to watch these on places other than, say, Twitch?
So I think the reason you go in VR and you were to watch a sporting event or do some kind of event as opposed to going in Twitch is going to be the kind of experience you can get that you're not going to have through Twitch. And that's what I think makes VR so compelling, is the experience itself, right? So what I mean by that is like, okay, right now you watch Twitch. Like, so if I'm watching Twitch here on my monitor, it's cool. It's a great video, but I'm pretty isolated. Maybe you and I could be in a call together and we could talk, but we're losing that those other senses that we could get through VR, right? So like if you and I were instead to put on a headset, I could literally be in the stadium with you or close to it, close to looking like a real stadium. You could be sitting there next to me. We could virtually high five. We can laugh. There could be someone right there in front of us who says some Twitch meme, which is now whatever VR meme thing in front of us. Like we laugh about that. Maybe we have our little virtual poster that we bought with our virtual coins, or maybe we made it ourselves and we like walking up and down the stairs. Maybe there's like guys up in the front all like doing a chant together, right? Like you have that stadium experience at home. Right. Like that's really amazing. It really, like, when you think about it like that, and you can't do that, just through Twitch. So I think that would be one factor. There's a lot of other things you could do, but that's the most, at least to me initially, the most compelling thing.
Awesome.
Yeah, for sure. Mainly just because a lot of esports in general is kind of always piggybacked on the size of the crowds that it draws, because that's the exciting thing to show. And I just think that we're definitely not getting back to that at any point in time. But I do think that people sure would love to just get with all their people again to cheer on, TSM or whoever it is. They just want to get behind their people while they're playing. And I think this just seems like the way we should be going.
Yeah, you're making me excited about the idea of pitching, because I'm thinking about pitching this stuff again when it comes to holiday season, because I do think that the timing's really good.
For sure.
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead, John.
No,
just drop the paperwork.
Yeah, no, it was just like, yeah, man, why am I doing this right now? Because I literally had this pitch, Justin. I this thing we're talking about. I have a deck for it, a business deck. I was actually in London last year pitching this, or it was earlier this year pitching this idea, and it actually was really well received. We were pretty close to writing up some contracts, but I was like, I got a little not so much discouraged, but I changed my focus back to Virtual Battlegrounds, which I think was really wise at the time because I needed to get the game out. But maybe that could be our next step.
I think it would be even good too, talking about the thing I don't like right now with current esports, even the bigger ones, Overwatch League, CDL, all of them, is that when we're trying to explain to the average person like tactics or what's happening, we're never really getting into the game to show it, kind of the way when NFL explains a play, they get down on the field. Like I feel like VR is also missing a thing as a component for all these other major leagues. How can you get inside the game and learn, like, why are these people positioning right here? And somebody could be on the screen being explaining, even if they're going to collegiate esports, this guy's set up here because that part, but you're in the game. You know what I mean? Right. You can stand there and show it. And, being able to implement more VR to accent these already major esports, I think is just a thing we're missing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's ways to do exactly what you're talking about, Justin, where it's actually really, it's much more difficult to do what you just said for a lot of games. It depends. So this is a little technical, but what you can actually do is you can like serialize all the data that's happening. So like I think a lot of bigger companies do this, like Riot does this, where they're like saving all the positions and all this stuff, right? And then you could take all that data and then you could push it forward to some sort of streaming service in VR. But basically, long story short is if they're doing that, there's a way where you could like, actually walk down, Summoner's Rift and like see it from the VR or first person perspective. And you could do this not in VR too, right? But it would be cool in VR as well as other games, right? As long as those companies are serializing that data and then whatever service is using to host it can somehow get that data and then use it. But yeah, it is possible. It is hard to do, though. Very actually challenging.
We have an interesting question from chat directly for you, Sean, about have you thought about trying to do like a VR spectator mode within Virtual Battlegrounds to do a lot of what you're talking about just to prove the concept?
It's a great question. Yes, and that is, I think, the next step we would take for this idea, right, would be to do it Virtual Battlegrounds. It's kind of been one of, so there's like a few different, honestly, thoughts that I have for my next steps, and I'm kind of deciding it and personally in terms of business. But if we decide to go that route, that would be our next step, right, would be to prove to ourselves that it works and use Virtual Battlegrounds as a testing base. And I've kind of thought of Virtual Battlegrounds always as a kind of first title for the company that would accelerate our position to do something bigger next. It might be that, that would really well. Let's start building this spectator app. And I think it would be more than a spectator app, right? But on a surface level, at first, it could be the spectator app. We use Virtual Battlegrounds as a test bay. We've already got a user and a community, user base and community built around it. They can also use it for this. And then maybe start working on another game as well that also takes advantage of this. And kind of like Valve is a good example, right? So Valve is this hyper, obviously extremely successful game studio that built Steam as a platform. And that's kind of what I'm thinking about doing for Cyberdream. I got to be careful. I got to be careful how many eggs I decided to over, right? Because we have contracting, we have our game studio, and then do I also build a platform? Because that's a lot. And it sounds like a lot too when you say it like that, and it really is. And that was my idea the last year or so, but I'm kind of like taking a step back and like calming down a little bit, focusing on Virtual Battlegrounds in the games and the contracting. I do like the idea of building that platform though. Like I'm very excited about the idea. So I'm kind of like, do I want to do this? Like, am I really going to go into this? I got to be careful if I do this. I think the key is going to be smart hiring people that can.
Well, I think that also just shows how much you've kind of developed, yourself from where you started with, VBG. Because, when you first did it, you're like, I can do this on my own in like a year. And now you're starting to realize, okay, I've already got this. I got to wear this hat for this. I got to wear this hat for that. If I do this, I'm going to need a lot of help. I'm going to need the money. I'm going to need to make sure I can split my time, and without the other ones kind of, dropping the ball a little bit. So it's just super cool to see, how far you've come from day one to where you are now, both as a company and a game, and a person. So that's awesome.
Thank you.
I would say, at least just kind of wrap up a little bit. Is there anything you would kind of like to let people know about the game or Cyberdream or yourself, or just anything you would like to chat about?
So if you're into VR, definitely check out Virtual Battlegrounds. You can just Google it. It'll come up on Steam. Buy it there. Awesome game. You like VR. Hop on our Discord. We got a really active community. If you're a developer, a gamer, whatever, hop on our Discord. If you're an entrepreneur, an investor, or something else along those lines, feel free to reach out to me personally on my LinkedIn. It's LinkedIn/Sean Pinnock. Just look up Sean Pinnock. You'll find me on LinkedIn. And anything at all, guys, feel free to reach out. I'm here to help you out or whatever. You just want to chat, reach out to me. I'm more than happy to have a conversation with you.
Yeah, and I'll get all those links from you and just compile them just kind of like at the show notes below so people can find them real easy. But I just want to say thank you so much, Sean, for hopping on and joining us and chatting. This has been super awesome.
Yep.
And really appreciate just getting to learn from you and some of the feedback you were able to share with us.
Thank you, John. It was a pleasure being on here. Those are great questions. And really kind of got to the heart of it. So thanks for having me, guys.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
See ya.
See ya.